Why is the TRIPS agreement important? Why is it worth studying? Well, it came as a shock to the international system when it arrived, the TRIPS agreement. It was unprecedented. Never before did we have intellectual property rules in the heart of trade rules. And this could cause some concern, really in two directions. Some people thought, well, intellectual property, it's a regulatory question. It's about rules behind the border. It's got nothing to do with trade. That was one concern. The other concern is, well, intellectual property is locking up public goods. It's encroaching on the public domain. It's going to cause problems for access to educational materials, for access to medicines. These were the concerns at the time. We have the advantage now, some 20 years later, of understanding how intellectual property rules really do fit in the international trade law system. And that's what we'll be exploring together in this course. On the first point, it's a bit easier to understand now that intellectual property is part of international trade, not only as part of the elusive value added that trade policy people are trying to work towards, to build the value of the traded products, to turn commodities into valuable goods. That's part of the function of intellectual property. So we're starting to understand that intellectual property is part of returning the value from trade to the original producers. We see this in the agricultural sector. We see this in a number of industries where the concern is to turn what are basic commodities into value-added products. But more interestingly, perhaps, we also see intellectual property as something that we trade in itself. When we download a software app, when we download an e-book, when we download music, if we're paying for it, then we're trading in intellectual property as such. What you're buying is not a song, not a book, not a software package. You're buying a certain license, a right to use the intellectual property. That to me is a kind of trading in intellectual property as such. And in the last 20 years, that's moved from being a kind of theoretical possibility to a mainstream area of commerce in a range of industries that are very important. The content industries, music, software, journalism, cinema. So as we look at the TRIPS agreement today, it actually is part of the broader sweep of international trade. Trade in knowledge, trade in value-added products, trade in intellectual property. The second area of concern, and this is one that you'll be exploring in some depth in this course, is that introducing intellectual property into the trade law system is going to create problems for public policy, for public health, protection of the environment, food, culture, education. Some deep issues come up in this regard. A lot of the debate, a lot of the practical work that's taken place under the TRIPS agreement in the last 20 years concerns exactly this area. The most obvious or the most urgent case has been the matter of public health. There were concerns that a TRIPS agreement, an agreement that dealt with pharmaceutical patents, that this would impede access to medicines, that this would cause problems for public health programs. Since then, we've seen a very interesting, very dynamic search for solutions, for safeguards, for positive policies that ensure access to medicines within the framework established by the TRIPS agreement, by the introduction of intellectual property into the trade law system. This is a large part of the work we do today in the WTO concerning the TRIPS agreement. And the message there is perhaps it's not a black or white matter. It's not either or. It's a matter of understanding the framework fully understanding the deeper public policy issues, and working out practically how to progress good policy outcomes in practice. And that practical understanding is something that we want you to take away from this course. It's not only public health. We hear debates about environment, about climate, about human rights in a broader sense. And we hope that this course will give you an understanding of the way these kind of considerations can be taken into account, are taken into account in a positive way when we look at the legal structure of the TRIPS agreement and we look at the way that the agreement has been applied and implemented in practice. So for me, it's an extraordinarily fascinating area to work in. It has many dimensions, many components that are interesting in themselves, but are also vitally important areas of public policy. So I wish you well in your studies and look forward to working with you in the years ahead. Thank you.